gays and lesbians as normal, and sanitizing gay sex are efforts to reduce the threat that queer identity and culture pose to the dominant culture. But the effort to normalize, to become normal, is a depoliticized, often desperate strategy to win safety and status by mimicking those with race, gender, sexual, and class privilege. By promising to go along to get along, no threat is made to entrenched power. And the cost of deploying this strategy is high. It requires us to hand over our agency to others and give them the power to define us, as well as the responsibility to make us feel safe, wanted, and acceptable. Now, in contrast, a queer sensibility and the Queer Social Justice Project appreciates that difference is not a problem, it's one of our most important assets. Authentic community takes place only by making more ample room for and showing greater respect and delight in social and cultural differences. Our pioneers at Stonewall were proudly self-defining and made common cause by standing shoulder to shoulder and high heel to high heel. Refusing to be silenced, they stood their ground and asserted their moral agency, all the while brashly asserting the goodness of their lives and the beauty of their loves. Refusing to normalize, they instead politicized their identities, joining together as a resistance community to oppose oppression of every stripe. They brazenly demanded for themselves and for us the freedom to be their fully queer selves, not only in relation to other LGBT persons, but also in relation to the wider world. They insisted that they had contributions to make to the wider community, and that in turn they were entitled, solely on the basis of their humanity, to receive contributions back from the wider community. The goal of Stonewall was not to fit in or to be accepted, but rather to celebrate the right to be queer and to critique and transform every injustice, every institution, and every cultural norm that harms and diminishes anyone, and to build an expansive, wildly inclusive justice movement to empower all people to flourish and take up their fair share of space. Stonewall insisted then, and it prods us to insist today, on our human right to be treated with respect and dignity as queer people, as those who, yes, differ from the cultural majority, but at the same time have spiritual and moral wisdom to share based on our hard-won resiliency in the face of oppression. Now, in setting up marriage equality as the singular prize, are we not in danger of losing a more radical commitment to human rights for everyone, regardless? The human entitlement to respect and to a fair share of resources. Aren't we being tempted to trade down, seeking the legal right to marry, but no longer pursuing a more comprehensive justice agenda that focuses not on coupling, but on community? Is our desire now only to acquire the same rights enjoyed by white, middle-class, married heterosexuals, so that white, middle-class, married homosexuals, too, can be privileged enough to stand above and apart from everyone else? We should pause and question any change strategy that goes about securing safety and basic rights by making queerness invisible. If we learn to normalize, then the prevailing cultural norms and structures of compulsory heterosexuality, of racialized white privilege, and of class hegemony will more likely go unchallenged. And then the moral problem gets to be misstated as the, quote, problem of homosexuality and whether outsiders should be allowed inside. At this point, all those situated within the Jesus movement should have our suspicion raised, because isn't our calling to take up a far more comprehensive justice agenda nothing less than to reconstruct the social order and transform the rules so that everyone benefits? Now, I do believe that winning or beginning to win the freedom to marry is a good and worthwhile pursuit. But I also believe that gaining equal marriage rights is not unambiguously good. Yes, the inclusion of gay men and lesbians within the ranks of married couples will further validate the integrity of same-sex love. And yes, legally sanctioned marriage will benefit those who can elect this option. But at the same time, civil marriage for same-sex couples only strengthens the special rights already accorded the marital family to the detriment of single persons and those in non-conventional relationships. And frankly, as if I haven't been frank, I doubt seriously if same-sex marriage will have a broadly transformative effect, especially if we only continue to privilege the married, devalue the unmarried, and do little to challenge current patterns of social and economic inequities. So as lesbian feminist theologian Mary Hunt puts it, shouldn't our justice vision be relational justice for all rather than legal remedy for a few? Stated differently, the truth of the matter is that acquiring a legal right does not always result in justice. A more comprehensive justice, a genuinely queer justice, requires more than adding same-sex couples to the mix and stirring. Yes, inclusion is good, but transformation is far better. Expanding the circle is a necessary, but it's an insufficient change strategy. We have to dig deeper so that we can debunk the cultural assumptions and reorder the skewed power dynamics that place so many at disadvantage while granting others unearned privileges. Yes, marriage equality matters, but only within a comprehensive justice framework that confronts not only sexual and gender oppression, but also white racism, economic exploitation, militarism, cultural elitism, and ecological degradation. A queer commitment to relational justice will insist that all persons, whether partnered or not, and all families, whether state licensed, church blessed or not, should be guaranteed the two things that every person deserves and needs: respect and the resources necessary for flourishing. The cultural crisis we face is not the denial of marriage rights. The cultural crisis is the loss of community and the destruction of the earth. So let's keep our eyes on the right prize. Gaining equal rights is good, but we also need to equalize social power and delegitimate the reigning cultural ideology, including religious claims, that hold sexual and other social hierarchies in place. You know, even if the Supreme Court this week had ruled that marriage equality should be legal in all 50 states, I would suggest our queer response should be yes, but. Yes, yes, LGBTQ workers would be able to marry the person they love, but they could still be fired in most states for displaying a picture of their family on their desk or in their locker. As Jay Michelson has written recently in the Huffington Post, in social struggles, legal equality is not the beginning of the end, it's the end of the beginning. Anti-LGBTQ animus remains. The spree of violence against transgender folks, particularly transgender women of color, are not vestiges of bygone days we thought we'd left behind. Rather, they are a reminder that most of the work still lies ahead. Never can we imagine that because some of us are secure, all of us are secure. I'm about to wrap up. What is undermining personal life and well-being for the vast majority in the U.S. and elsewhere is not same-sex love, it's not marriage equality. What's undermining personal life and well-being for the vast majority is rather advanced capitalism's erosion of social and economic security and the destruction of communities as well as the earth for the purpose of maximizing wealth for a few. Now, in the midst of stressful times, and that's where we are, people, perhaps ourselves included, often turn to their private relationships, primarily marriage and family, for identity, emotional support, and economic survival. But the cautionary word that I would offer here is that intimate, romantic pair bonds, even enduring ones, are no substitute for the security of a richly textured community life. The pathway to restored health, sanity, and the common good will not be found through coupled love, but rather only through enlarging and strengthening communities of vision and struggle. It was the Stonewall resistance movement that discovered once again the spiritual truth that community saves lives. So that coming out was coming in to community. While marriage and family are of great value, I have a family of my own, and I treasure them as they treasure me. And while families and marriages are important, reconnecting with community has greater urgency, especially at this cultural moment when marriage is no longer the major social institution organizing most people's lives, and when even those who marry spend more or half or more of their adult years outside of marriage. Besides, those of us within the Christian tradition would do well to recall how Jesus and the Jesus movement were never particularly invested in either marriage or family, and in fact were indifferent, if not downright hostile, and instead focused their energy on developing a spiritual renewal movement for justice and a new moral order. If we queerly insist that the doing of justice should lie at the heart of all social relating, beginning with the most intimate, then the change that should spark our desire is not mere inclusion, but rather spiritual, moral, political, economic, and cultural transformation from the grassroots upward and from our bedrooms to far beyond.